All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. My name is Rick Butler. Joined with me, as always, that is Ryan Shumpert. He's already pulling double duty here on a Tuesday morning. An episode of the Diamond Pass is in the books. If you're listening to this now, you should be able to find the Diamond Pass wherever you're finding your other podcasts. But it is a big week here on Rocky Top. Not only is there baseball going on, there's a little bit of basketball news, but there's plenty of football news. Welcome him in. Ryan Shumpert, good morning, my friend. How are you doing? Welcome back to the show.
Doing well. We had double duty this morning. We were originally planning on doing baseball, Jack and I, last night, but the news of the week that we will be mostly talking about today broke last night and pushed the plans to the morning. So glad to be back and glad to have at least a short-term resolution to Tennessee's football quarterback situation.
Yeah, I was in a similar boat as you, Ryan, last night. It wasn't necessarily doing work for our own company, but I was about to sit down to watch the Raw after WrestleMania, which is a big deal in my kind of world. I had to put that on hold, I had to put that on pause because we had a football story to be talking about. So I get I get that feeling. You and I are both sacrificing on a Monday night when news like this breaks.
I mean, probably you sacrificing more. I mean, I was just pushed off other work to the next day. I wasn't actually sacrificing anything that I was doing out of joy.
Well, in
but you kind of
fairness,
got saved too. You didn't have to watch the wrestling nonsense.
Maybe in your book, I was hate watching a little bit, which I've been doing a lot recently. I hate watched both of the Mavericks playing games.
Yeah,
I hate watched Raw after WrestleMania. I'm upset with things right now, but that is all right because we have plenty of news to talk about. Ryan, let's just get right into the big story of the day, less than 3 minutes into the show today. And that is, according to a report from ESPN's Chris Lowe last night, which was Monday evening, it appears as though former Appalachian State quarterback and UCLA quarterback Joey Aguilar will be planning to go to Tennessee out of the transfer portal. Planning to sign with Tennessee. Excuse me. That's kind of the phrasing I was looking for. We knew that Tennessee was looking at a bunch of different quarterbacks in the portal, and we also knew that Tennessee was going to be a buyer in this market. Not only did the Stars sort of align that direction after Nico Iamaleava's divorce with Tennessee last week, but Josh Heupel also said so as much himself after the spring game, that with only 2 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster, you have rising redshirt freshman Jake Merklinger and rising true freshman George McIntyre. This was always going to be, to me, a likelihood for Tennessee. Now, we did hear a couple of names as the week went on. We heard about the Notre Dame backup quarterback, Steve Angeli. Obviously, you heard about some of these Power 4 names, the Kansas State kid, the TCU kid. Seems like Tennessee might have done their homework on those, but it looks like this was going to be I should say it doesn't surprise me that this is sort of the route that Tennessee was going. Tennessee needed a quarterback, and at the same time, Joey Aguilar needed a home.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I think Tennessee probably tried to poach somebody off of other rosters, whether that be Josh Hoover at TCU. I think that's probably the most public, with some of the reporting in Rick's neck of the woods last week down in Dallas that Tennessee came after him and he took a pay cut but also got a raise. I think the same thing, Luke Altmaier, that name at Illinois had popped up kind of over the weekend. It seemed like there were some, at the very least, discussions there. And I think Tennessee ended up probably talking to a lot of guys and probably got a lot of quarterbacks a raise at their current school, if I had to guess. So in the end, I'm sure that would have been Tennessee's hope, or Tennessee's biggest wish, to have poached somebody off of a more proven Power 5 starter, or Power 4 starter, I guess I should say. But that was, always going to be a somewhat difficult task when you're talking about convincing somebody to leave in April after spring practice to learn a new offense, to just a couple months before the season to build chemistry with a receiver core that on paper isn't that great. And so in the end, it ends up being somebody that was already going to be in the portal. The Tennessee didn't have to get into the portal, drag into the portal. And obviously in Aguilar, they get a guy that was displaced because of Nico Iamaleava. UCLA brought in Nico Iamaleava to start over him. So with 1 year of eligibility, he was going to have to go find somewhere else. And, with Tennessee, I guess, by this point desperate. Tennessee hadn't been able to flip anybody, or hadn't been able to convince anybody to jump into portal. They were going to have to add somebody, to your point, Rick, and to what Josh Heupel said after the spring game. And at that point, it made sense for these two to move forward together, heading into Aguilar's final season of college football and the 25 season for Tennessee.
Yeah, no doubt. And by the way, I hope what I was saying made sense a minute ago. As soon as I was really starting to kind of get on my horse and the horse was starting to gallop a little bit, I had a knock at the door. I had an important wedding related delivery to come my way. So I hope I was making sense as my mind started to drift that way. But I think, you go back to last week and there was that report that maybe Tennessee was interested in Josh Hoover, the Texas Christian quarterback. And then he ends up getting a new deal with the Horned Frogs. You're right. There were a couple other names. And then this Notre Dame backup quarterback that I do think was interesting. And it sounds like Tennessee might have done their homework on that one. But I wonder if maybe just sort of Joey Aguilar's his resume, his experience in the sport, even though it's at a different level, even though it has been really exclusively at App State, I wonder if his experience maybe stood out. Yes, Stephen Jelly had that really nice 6 or 7 drive in the playoffs against Penn State last season, but I wonder if Tennessee and Josh Heupel just really kind of found Aguilar because of not only his experience, and you are asking a big thing with this situation. You're asking a guy to come in and compete for a quarterback job without a spring training camp to go through, and on a team who's already pretty meshed together. But I wonder how much that might have affected things as well. But again, you've got a guy who's played 2 full seasons for the Mountaineers. You've got a guy who does have, I believe, more than 6,700 passing yards. We'll get into all those stats here soon. And a guy with more than, what is this? It looks like just about 56 touchdowns to his name through the air in those 2 seasons with the Mountaineers. So I think there's reasons to maybe be a little bit skeptical about what's going to happen. I do personally believe that it is going to be a quarterback battle, even though Aguilar is the favorite. I still think there's going to be a healthy competition in Knoxville. But this is going to be the guy for Tennessee, who they're going to be bringing in this replacement for Nico Iamaleava. Obviously, it's not a true replacement, but after all the drama happened last weekend, this is the guy that Tennessee found in the portal, said, hey, this is the guy that we want to bring in, let him compete for what we want to go compete for next fall.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think it'll be positioned or by Heupel as an open competition, and I think to some extent it will be that. And look, I think the reports were like in the 1.2 million range of what Tennessee's going to be paying Aguilar to come in. So not anything close to what they were paying Nico, but I still think a decent sized gap there between him and Jake Merklinger, which just makes me think if all things are equal, he'll get the first crack at it. Doesn't mean he'll be the guy all year necessarily. And look, Merklinger could just clearly beat him out in fall camp, and then Merklinger's the guy and you roll with him. But like you said, I think Aguilar just from that alone is the clear favorite. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, one thing that I'll already, it's going to just be funny to me. People are going to call him a UCLA transfer quarterback, and I guess that is kind of the case, but like, he should be referred to as an App State transfer quarterback.
Yeah.
Like, once the game start last year,
well,
he didn't play a snap.
Somebody did get on our case about that on some sort of comment. I don't know if it was Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, what it was, but somebody did get on us and say, UCLA might be a stretch. And it is true, but you're right. If you're talking about truly where he played football and where he's coming from, it's a lot more so App State than the quick stint at UCLA.
Yeah, I think in the quick headlines and stuff yesterday, you say UCLA because that's where he was immediately. That's where he left. Probably a little bit better for SEO as well. But in the stories when I wrote about him, I said he came to Tennessee by way of UCLA and App State. So I included both. But no, it's it makes sense for Tennessee, and it'll be just interesting to see how it pans out, and what if they're able to go find some guys also with some of the savings they have in Nico, if they're able to go find some guys in the portal to add to the roster here in the spring transfer window.
Hey, it's always nice when you have something that you're going to spend money on and then it's not as much as you thought you might be spending in that direction. I don't know about you. Some people are savers, some people are spenders. I'm not even really going with a football analogy here. I'm just going with kind of a lifestyle thing. I'm a spender. I take that excess money, I go right out and spend it myself. So maybe if Tennessee is anything like me, we will see that money put to use. Ryan, I want to actually talk about the quarterback himself, though. In 2 years at App State, again, mentioned a minute ago, he threw for more than 6,700 passing yards. He threw about 56 touchdowns to 24 interceptions, did have a decrease in production from his first year in 2023 to his second year in 2024. There was a drop in completion percentage. There was a drop in yards. There was a drop in touchdowns, and there was an increase in interceptions. Now, at the same time, though, the Mountaineers also took a big hit. I believe their record went from 9-5 to 5-6. So things in general did not go great for the Mountaineers, but you do get a little bit of a production drop. Now, I have been extremely excited to talk to you, Ryan, about this for, I don't know, a little more than 12 hours at this point since the news broke. I haven't gotten your take yet on what you think of him as a quarterback. Obviously, we've talked about the somewhat obvious situation that, yes, he's going to be competing for the starting position. Yes, he's probably the favorite going into the battle, but I haven't heard of what you think about him as a quarterback yet. What have you seen in the short time that you've been able to look over his tape, look over his work, what he's done? Obviously, we're going to have a lot more time to break down this quarterback over the summer. But what have you seen so far in here in the early stages after this report?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, it's been a short time, so I don't know how formed. I've watched some of, and there's not a ton of like highlight videos for him, given he played at Appalachian
No,
State. But I've just
there's
I've
not.
just watched. I think there was the one clip of every offensive snap against Clemson, which probably was the most informative, and then just a couple other game highlights of his in his 2 years at App State. You go through and I clicked through and watched the the App State offensive plays on there. So look, I don't think he's a great player by any means at the SEC level. I just continue to go back to being puzzled by. I mean, you said a gap in his production. I mean, a pretty significant gap in his production
Yeah.
from his junior year to his senior year in 2024 at App State. I mean, over 700 more passing yards, over 10 more passing touchdowns, 4 less interceptions, more rushing yards. So not a healthy amount there. And like I don't really see. There's no obvious thing you would point to say why did this happen. His top 4 receivers were back. The starting tight end was back. Same offense coordinator, so playing in the same offense system, one would think. I haven't grounded enough tape to be like, have a hard take on what the offensive line situation was, but I've just looked at the PFF grades. The PFF pass block grades were actually better in 24 for App State than they were in 23. So it's hard to say. I think just from watching his tape, he does get a little bit of happy feet when he's under pressure and makes some bad decisions when he's under pressure. He is a quarterback that has puts the ball in harm's way some, that'd be a negative. You do wonder, Tennessee's offense generally downplays some of those decisions for quarterbacks. You don't see Tennessee quarterbacks throw a lot of interceptions. You do wonder if that bodes well for him there. And I do think on that point, he pretty crisp on the quick stuff, just the quick timing stuff. I thought he was pretty accurate throwing the football. Was pretty good on those curl routes, on those slant routes.
Yeah.
Did a solid job there. I would say from what I've seen, kind of as you'd expect for a quarterback that's playing at App State, kind of hit or miss on stuff down the field, kind of hit or miss on stuff on the run. Kind of off script. Does some good things there. Certainly not perfect. So I think there are some things to like, but certainly not a guy that just wows you by any means. I'll be interested in something I haven't done to this point, but something that I haven't done to this point, but plan on looking at later today is just like his passing chart. His numbers, short right, short left, middle, all that stuff, and kind of see what that looks like. Just in that Clemson game in 24, they threw a lot of quick curl routes, which is something we have seen in Tennessee's offense, especially with Hooker in 21 and 22. So I do wonder about that, and I do wonder how much Tennessee on the fly with such a short such a short time frame how much Tennessee will kind of adapt to him and what he's done in his career, as opposed to making him
Sure.
completely adapt to Josh Heupel's offense.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought right there, and I think that's where you get a lot of just maybe that initial comfortability connected between the two sides. I think that obviously, in my mind, Tennessee would be taking a quarterback that they did feel like had enough traits that they could work with in their own offense. Because you also got to remember is that you don't have time to get your offense used to Aguilar as well, right? I think the first thought when you hear a news like this post training camp is, all right, what is Aguilar going to look like without a training camp to go through to get his feet wet? Then on the other side, though, you sometimes forget about that the team won't be able to truly figure out what their starting quarterback looks like yet until they're under center, in the fall for training camp as well. So there is something interesting there. I think he does bring some good traits to the table. His athleticism, I think, is great. His size at 6'3", I think, is nice. Tennessee coming from a quarterback who's 6'6", so still some height there. It's not like you're dropping 6 to 7 inches on the height of your quarterback. That's nice, I think. But then you're right. I watched some of the highlights that you did. I'd imagine that people can go on ahead and watch those over at RockyTopInsider.com. We have a nice compilation of a couple of videos. Like Ryan alluded to, it's not the easiest job in the world to find Joey Aguilar highlight videos, but we found a couple that you can watch through. But maybe just that arm talent, that's something that I will be I don't want to say skeptical towards, but just a little bit hesitant on and seeing how that goes until we truly see him against SEC competition. And that does include Tennessee, their fall training camp, because there's SEC talent on both sides of the ball there. But we're going to really see what this guy looks like in September when Tennessee's got some big games on the way, if he is that starting quarterback. So that's kind of what I'm interested in, the transition from Group of Five to SEC football. That's a huge step to take. And you're right, Ryan. There was a little bit of a stop at UCLA there, but it's not in the way of, hey, he was facing Big Ten talent last year. He went on the road to Indiana. He saw that environment. It wasn't necessarily that. So there are some question marks that people are going to be talking about and people are going to be breaking down all off season long. We'll see what this battle looks like come this fall. But I agree. I think there are going to be some question marks. I think that there are some, I don't want to say red flags. I think that's definitely a bit of a stretch, but just some areas of concern where you want to see how they're going to get worked out over these next 6 to 7 months or so.
Yeah, I do think one thing I'll hit on that. One thing I'll hit on that with really 2 points that I truly have about it. One, at the end of the day, and Deshaun Foster is not the source of quarterback play in the world. UCLA cast his kid aside for Nico. UCLA clearly did not like where they were at the quarterback position after spring, or maybe didn't like. They at least were ecstatic. They at least thought they could upgrade by going out and getting Nico. So I think that's one, and I think that is something. And I don't know if this is anything, but it's more of a for what it's worth. If I was Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley, I'd be reminding him of that every day once he gets on campus. I think you'll have a highly, highly motivated player, a guy that has a lot to prove after UCLA. Cast him aside like day-old vegetables or something. So I think that aspect of it will be interesting. I think when you look at Angeli. Because he was kind of, I think, probably the best of the quarterbacks in the portal, was the best other option. Yeah. I think Aguilar can run significantly better, is way more dynamic with his feet. Not even that he's a great runner, but I just think Angeli doesn't move very well. So I like that aspect, especially when you talk about an offensive line that could be a little bit shaky. But yeah, and I think he runs the ball better than Merklinger too. I think he's the better running quarterback that the best running quarterback Tennessee will have on its roster. Not that he's some incredible dual threat or anything, but yeah, no, that's kind of where I've landed on my first little assessment. And that's the problem. Appalachian State's in Boone, North Carolina. There's not a ton of people to cover Appalachian State football, but I've been trying to track down somebody to talk to him and hopefully for a story, but just the very least to try to get some more context on why his production dropped off so much. I mean, he was the newcomer of the year in the Sun Belt in 23. They made the Sun Belt championship game, had a really nice season. And then last year he was Sun Belt preseason offensive player of the year. And as a team, they were terrible, went 5-6. I think as a team, you'd put more on the defense. Their defense was just miserable. Gave up over 30 points a game. I think it was something like 115 out of 130 nationally. So that was more of the reason the team was bad, but the offense definitely took a step back too. And you just look on paper of who they had back, no new coordinator. It's kind of puzzling as to why their offense took such a step back.
Did he lose his running back?
Maybe.
Think that
I'm not sure. I looked at that.
let me see. I've got the name right here.
Amani
Nate
Marshall.
Noel.
Yeah, Nate Noel would have been gone last year. He was not on. At least he did not record any stats.
Okay. All right, I might need to go back and look that up. I thought maybe he transferred to Missouri or something.
No,
but,
that's what I'm saying. You're right.
Okay.
Nate Noel was there in 23 and was not there in 24.
Okay, so
but I don't think that makes a big difference.
But yes, there you go.
Yeah.
To your point, like I don't think you can mark 700 less passing yards, 10% or 10 points on the completion percentage, 4 extra interceptions, things along that nature. I don't think you can chalk that up to the running back. It does suck to lose your star running back, who is obviously being eyed by SEC programs, but it is a bizarre. It is a bizarre situation, and one that we're going to try to get to the bottom of, here this spring and April.
I will say, to your point, the running game as a whole was not as good. They ran for 2,400 yards in 23 and just under 1,700 yards last year. So the running game did take a step back too.
But then again, he had 70 more passing attempts. 70 more passing attempts in 23. So you would think that if they don't have a run, if they don't have a run game in 24, you'd be thinking maybe that was the year he threw 460 attempts compared to 390. But I guess that's just the what happens when you have an offense that doesn't get to stay on the field for as long as they want to over the span of 11 games or 12, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I will say they played 3 more games, actually.
Yeah, 3. I had to look that up too. I was like, this doesn't add up.
Yeah, I don't know why they only played 11 games last year.
5-6 was their record.
Yeah, I don't know why they only played 11 games, but 12 the year before, 12 regular season games, Sun Belt Championship game, bowl game. So you naturally, when you miss a bowl game,
9-5. It's pretty.
Yeah, you don't see that. That's a kind of an odd record. I think did Tennessee go? Tennessee might have gone. I guess they went 10-4 in 2007 when they went 9-3 in the regular season and lost an SEC championship, and I think they won the bowl game that year.
Yeah,
I'm not totally positive on that.
Yeah. Anyways, we will see, but I think the at least for me here in these initial 12 hours, is that Tennessee got their quarterback. They didn't necessarily go out there and get they didn't poach a starting Power 4 quarterback from somewhere. They got a guy who, Ryan, I think you just said it the most perfect way a minute ago. They got the guy that UCLA chose Nico Iamaleava over. And in some ways, I don't know what the conversations were last week, but maybe even chose the Iamaleava family over, as Madden Iamaleava, the 2025 quarterback, transfers, I guess, back to UCLA, a place that he was originally committed to after spending his early enrollee spring with Arkansas. So either way, all that's just kind of a lot of words to say. Tennessee's got their quarterback. It's not necessarily the quarterback that is, at least right now, to me, is going to present fear in the eyes of SEC defenses across the year. There's a couple of things that I think you can build on this summer to get the optimism a little bit up if you want to do so before the football season. I think there's also a couple of places to be cautious. This is just a big box that is continuing to unfold, and we're only in the initial stages. So there's so much more to go here, whether it be spring ball, whether it be fall ball, and then obviously on the way to the season. There's still so much to unpack and unfold here, but I don't know. It's kind of a little bit in the 12 hours. I think that Joey Aguilar is a good quarterback. I do not necessarily think he is a great quarterback. And I think there's going to be some challenges, but hey, this is why we're in sports, right? There's a lot of drama, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot to be seen, and that's kind of the situation right now, Joey Aguilar.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of unknown and a lot of questions about how he will look in Tennessee's offense, and it's just, I mean, it's a quick. You're talking about a guy that played in one offense last year, just went to a new school to learn a new offense in spring practice, and now is going to be learning a different offense in here just a couple months. So uh, I just think with that, naturally, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, that is Joey Aguilar. We've got more content up on him over at RockyTopInsider.com. Not only do we have our breaking news post, we have a 5 things to know, which is a really good way to just get a little bit of early information on Aguilar. Maybe even if you want to impress your friends with it, you can do so with that. And then we also have a watch and a highlights piece up right now for some of his play over at App State against Clemson. I believe maybe against Eastern Carolina. There's a couple of other things. So go ahead and check all that out. But then just stay tuned to Rocky Top Insider because there will be a lot more Joey Aguilar content as Tennessee has its quarterback out of the transfer portal. The former App State Mountaineer turned sort of UCLA Bruin turned Tennessee Volunteer, as long as the reports are correct. Ryan, any other kind of football thoughts? I mean, obviously we have the Nico Imaliava situation. I feel like most people, though, we got out a lot of our thoughts through the internet, through the website. We did a ton of writing about it. The saga, the messy divorce, the public divorce with Tennessee, Tennessee standing on business. The college world was applauding Tennessee last week for standing on business. I think the fan base was very inspired by the fact that Tennessee was not going to let their program be held hostage by a player and their agent, if you will. I'm putting agent in air quotes if you're just listening on the podcast. At the same time, though, we also knew that Tennessee was going to come out of this taking a hit at the quarterback position in terms of just overall talent all around. So we do know that. And again, we are left with Joey Aguilar as Tennessee's next quarterback. We'll see how it goes, but boy, has it been a wild week or two here in Knoxville.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I don't think anybody, the spring transfer window usually a little bit less movement, a little bit less chaos, but more chaos in the spring transfer window for Tennessee than there has ever been in any transfer window, spring, spring or winter, or nonetheless. And not completely over as Tennessee targets. Kind of looks like they're trying to add a receiver, maybe trying to add a
Yeah.
defensive tackle, a couple other spots that they're looking to shore up. And with your metaphor, use some of their savings to be spenders.
What are you? Are you a saver? I know you're not, or I know you're not a spender, but what are you?
Yeah, I guess more of I don't even know if I'd completely say saver. Somewhere in the middle. I'm rarely gonna be like, all right, let's just go spend this. Let's just go spend this money elsewhere. I'm more
Yeah.
just kind of like, all right, I'm not necessarily throwing it in the savings account, but I'm just kind of, yeah. Well, I'll have this money in the
Here's the
checking
thing.
account, and I'll spend it when I spend it.
If you could just give me a side profile real quick. Give me a sec. Those are the old AirPods. You need the new ones, my friend. You need the new. I've been trying to get this going
You
for
have been.
years now, years, and so that's why I say that Ryan's not a spender. Because if it was me, oh boy, I'd find reasons to go get new headphones if I could. Hey, let's do this real quick. Let's take a quick break. We've been talking a lot about football. We're going to take a break because there's a little bit of basketball news. On the other side of this break, we're going to tell you what that basketball news is. So we're going to do a little bit of time traveling. You'll hear this in one fell swoop. We will take a quick break and then unpause it on the other side. A little bit of basketball news coming up on the RTI Press Pass. All right, back here on the RTI Press Pass podcast, a little bit of time traveling for you on our end, on your end. Well, you just heard me a quick second ago. Let's kick it over to Ryan. Ryan, what was that news we're looking at? Not necessarily a positive for Tennessee, but still Tennessee tangential.
Yeah, Rodney Rice, who Tennessee's top remaining transfer portal target and just target in general, committed to USC over to Vols and Villanova and a couple other schools. But I think those three were the three schools that he visited along with Arizona, but the three most serious targets. So I think you kind of could read the tea leaves, move this one moving away from Tennessee a little bit in the last week. probably amplified by the fact that on Sunday night, Tennessee lined up a visit with Oklahoma shooting guard Duke Miles for Wednesday this week. So that's kind of where Tennessee turns now. Losing Ronnie Rice, definitely a big loss, a guy that I think when you combine him with what we're going to talk probably more about in a minute, and Nate Ament landing in Knoxville, I think if you would add Rice in there, Tennessee would have had a top 5 type team. And now it's kind of not quite back to the drawing board, but Tennessee just moves on to the next target as they try to find. Really, I think they need to find 2 shooting guards in the portal, but one of those guys being a true starter, and Duke Miles was that for a SEC team that made the NCAA tournament a year ago.
Did Mr. Miles play against Tennessee in that game in Norman where Tennessee donned the all black dark mode jerseys for the first time on the road?
Yes, did not do a whole lot, score as you would kind of expect, given Oklahoma.
I was going to say, in
points.
fairness, I don't remember anyone from the Sooners really playing that well or giving Tennessee that much trouble. I feel like that was maybe I'm just discrediting the game as a whole, but I feel like that was just a pretty one-sided. Tennessee's in control of this thing. Tennessee gets it from, start to finish and moves on to the next game.
Yeah, he scored 6 points, grabbed 3 rebounds, and had 2 assists. Shot 2 and 9 from the field, 2 of 5 from 3-point range. So he averaged as a whole, he averaged 9.4 points, 2.5 rebounds, 2 assists. He shot 43% from 3-point range, though. Only took 93 triples, so made 40 and 93. So, he's a solid player. I think he's like a low-level starting caliber player. I definitely think it's a pretty decent step back compared to Rodney Rice, especially you kind of just look at his game log. A lot of just a very inconsistent player for Oklahoma, essentially. But, I would say on the positive side of that was his first year at the high major level. He'd played his first 3 seasons at Troy. Another season at High Point, and then just last year at Oklahoma. So maybe he's a guy, we kind of talked about this with Jacoby Gillespie, that can find another gear in his second year in the SEC. But I do think a starting caliber player, and, I'm going to have to look this up to be 100% sure on the teams, but he's taken 4 different visits this week. USC is one of them. I'll be interested to see if that visit still happens. I would imagine
because
USC would probably... Yeah, because of Rice. I'd imagine USC would probably still take him, but I'm sure what their NIL commitment, they probably can't sell him on being a starter. I just think they become a much less serious player. So he's at A&M, I think he got to A&M. He's at A&M right now. Slash was there on Monday, and then was originally planning on going to both USC and Baylor later in the week. So we'll see that USC visit happens. But that's I think where Tennessee really turns, and now is they look for a transfer shooting guard.
What is that? Buckyball, muscle ball, Baylor ball. It's kind of the direction that, or I guess maybe the tour that he's taking, if you will. He's with Buckyball right now.
Buckyball right now. I don't know what the Baylor. What that phrase?
I was just trying to think of it, so I went with
Ronnie Rice hopping on the Must Bus out in Southern California.
Hopping on the Must Bus. That's right. Eric Musselman, man, what a character. By the way, you mentioned Jacoby Gillespie a minute ago. Almost said Jacoby Thomas. No, that's a safety. Jacoby Gillespie, Jeff Borzello on Monday recently ranked his top 100 transfers in college basketball. Tennessee fans obviously are no strangers to getting solid transfers from the portal with Dalton Knecht and Chaz Lanier in back-to-back years. Jacoby Gillespie ranks as the number 9 transfer player in the portal, or at least who was in the portal, who was, maybe still is, transfer players overall. Number 9 player out of the 100 that he looked at. So that is not a bad place to be. A lot of people are very complimentary of what Gillespie can do. I think he fills a lot of voids for this Tennessee, especially offense, but just roster in general. And then Rodney Rice, who you were talking about a second ago, the former teammate at Maryland, who's now going to Southern Cal, was back at number 17. So a little bit of a drop off there, but obviously two highly talented players, 2 players in the top 20 of the portal rankings. Jalen Carey, Tennessee's forward transfer from Vanderbilt, was not in the rankings. That being said, though, I don't think that Rick Barnes necessarily cares about something like that. If you ask Rick Barnes, he told the media yesterday that he felt like Carey was Ryan, correct me if I'm getting this quote wrong, maybe the best screener that they had played last
Yeah, I think
year.
so.
And so I think when you're talking to Rick Barnes, he would much rather have what he saw with his own eyes rather than what other people are saying. But Tennessee's transfer is Jacoby Gillespie, who ranks as the number 9 player in the portal. Now, that's not the only place that Tennessee's going to go get their talent from this year. Tennessee also made a huge splash on the recruiting trail with the addition of Nate Ament. Talk about interrupting my plans. Talk about sabotaging my
Yeah.
night. That was 2 minutes after WrestleMania had started on a Sunday evening. I couldn't believe that. But either way, huge news for Tennessee basketball. Huge news for Tennessee fans. I saw a lot of fans were thrilled about this on Sunday evening. 5-star power forward Nate Ament. He is headed to Tennessee off of the high school recruiting trail. A big get for the for the Vols and Rick Barnes, who can be called the Barnes.
No doubt about that. I do think that maybe the most disappointing thing about his commitment, and shout out Grant Ramey of VolQuest.com for this one, such a huge missed opportunity. He had such a dramatic recruitment, went
It's gonna be
so
an
deep.
office quote.
No, it's
Maybe a
not. And he
reference.
commits
Okay.
on Easter Sunday night, and the caption was just there to be, "It is finished." It was just there. It was just sitting right there. "It is finished," with a picture, a commitment video, graphic to Tennessee. So that was disappointing.
Oh
Not much
man.
else about it disappointing from Tennessee's perspective. And look, I won't
Yeah.
pretend, I've only been covering Tennessee basketball really the back half of Rick Barnes' tenure at Tennessee, the post Grand Admiral years. And I won't pretend to be tight or super, super close with Rick Barnes or anything like that. But in my time covering the team, I don't think there's another player that I've seen him want more than Nate Ament. He really, really
Really?
wanted this guy. Really,
Wow.
really one of the top targets for him and for Tennessee. And, to me, it kind of felt like they were dead in his recruitment in February and March. They were in his top 5, but it felt like they were probably along with Arkansas somewhere 4 and 5. And then after the season, really up the efforts, I think, up to, the NIL standpoint and surged in there. Certainly Louisville spent a bunch of money elsewhere in the portal. And it kind of became a Tennessee Duke battle, and Tennessee was able to get the job done. So just a massive win. At this time last week, we would have said Tennessee needed to really address the 2 spot and the 3 spot. Both those spots kind of on the perimeter outside of point guard, and they did that. While they're still looking for a shooting guard, they've addressed things at the small forward spot with Nate Ament.
Nate Ament is a really talented prospect and a guy who I believe that he not only has a very high ceiling, but he's also got a pretty high floor coming into college basketball next year as a freshman. I'm going to be really interested to see what Rick Barnes does with him. He's a freaky talent. We've seen Rick Barnes. We know the style of his program, that you've got to earn your minutes on the court. Just because you were a 5-star, just because you can shoot a little bit in practice, doesn't mean that you're going to earn your minutes on the court. He's going to make you earn those, if you will. But I think that this is a kid who has so many talents to his game and is going to continue unlocking those throughout the year. I really think that this could be one of those situations where he looks like a different player from the start of the year to the finish of the year. And not that he's got a bad starting point, but just because he's got so much basketball talent in his game and to what he does, that we might just start seeing things unlocked one game after another. This little part of a game, this little part of his game, this little part of his game as the season goes on. And when you're talking about college basketball, and you're talking about a guy that you're probably only going to have for 1 year, what more can you ask for, right? And to continually get better as you hopefully believe that your roster is getting better throughout the season as well. A really talented player, but Ryan, why is he talented? I mean, what does he do well besides, what is he, like 6'7", 6'8", maybe even 6'9", somewhere around there?
Yeah, 6'9" is what he's listed at. I think it's that aspect. He's 6'9", and he has the skill set of a guard with how he can shoot the ball and handle the basketball. I think that's the most noticeable thing, or the thing that kind of just slaps you in the face of why he's a top 5 recruit in the country and why he's a guy projected to go into top 10 of the 2026 NBA draft at this point, and certainly a long way out, and things change there. But That's, I think, why there's so much buzz. I think, from Tennessee's aspect, and something I was told was just an incredibly high motor. A guy that plays extremely, extremely hard on the defensive end of the court, plays hard on offense, makes the right play on offense. I think that's something that really excites Tennessee about him. And I think that's something that, it kind of it goes back to our conversation with Joey Aguilar, trying to find tape on him to break down. It's always harder for me to break down, at least when you're talking about a guy that is going to be an instant impact. It's harder for me to find tape and really break down what a high schooler can do as opposed to a transfer, just because of how limited you are out there. And that's something that doesn't show up on the highlight tapes. You don't see him, you don't see his motor defensively, you don't see the effort he plays with, but that's something that I know Tennessee is really high on. So I think that stands out. And, I would agree with you. I was asked this on Chase Thomas podcast on Monday night, where he falls in the range of a 5-star. I'd say he's kind of between that of like a Kevin Durant, Cooper Flag, who comes in and is just one of the best players in the country from their first game. Like, I don't think he's that. I think he's somewhere between that and like a Kennedy Chandler, I think averaged, maybe around 13 points per game in his freshman season. Like you said, I think you'll see this. This was how Kennedy Chandler was. I think you'll see this with Nate Ament. He continues to get better over the course of the season. There are learning curves that he has to face, probably early in SEC play, like you saw with Chaz Lanier, but a guy that has the potential to just be a really, really high-level player for Tennessee by the end of the season, and certainly an effective player for Tennessee all year long.
If you had to pick, who's better at Tennessee, Joey Aguilar or Nate Ament?
I definitely take Nate Ament.
I think you might take the
doubt.
5-star power forward. He's pretty good. He seems pretty good.
Yeah, and I will say that note, the recruiting rankings list him as a power forward. I think more of a small forward is how Tennessee will use him.
Yeah,
play a little bit as a stretch for power forward, like play some 4 spot. And if you're going to say a question to me, it would just be like, physically, how does he hold up? He's like listed at 6'9".
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. Physically,
so
how
he's
does
kind
he
of a
hold up?
stick. And I'm sure Tennessee will add some muscle, will add some weight to him by the time, once he gets on campus and by the time he's playing in these games. But how he holds up inside, how he holds up on the glass, those would kind of be my question marks for him. As he at least the biggest question marks for him as he transitions from high school to the SEC.
There is a ton happening on Rocky Top right now. Not only is Tennessee, the football team, bringing in a new quarterback to get into a battle for the starting position this fall, but Tennessee men's basketball also reloading and rebuilding their roster as well after back-to-back runs to the Elite Eight. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to get into. We are doing all of that over on RockyTopPenster.com. Make sure you check it out each and every day for your latest Tennessee news, notes, and coverage. But, man, there's a lot to get to with, again, Joey Aguilar, Tennessee football's next quarterback, and then also Nate Ament, in addition to a slew of other incoming players to this Tennessee basketball program. But those are 2 big names there, and I'm sure the 2 names that people are going to be talking about in Vol Nation this week, whether you're looking online, whether you're listening to the radio show, to the podcast, I think those are the 2 names that you are certainly going to be hearing as Tennessee fans get to know their new 2 players, whether it be Joey Aguilar or Nate Ament. Ryan, I'm sure that we have a lot more plans to get more content up on the website. Is that correct?
No doubt. Yeah, no, I've got up a little quiet time this morning and jumped into 2 podcasts and watching some Joey Aguilar tape in between to try to be as informed on that. So it's a late start to the day from a podcast or from a content standpoint, but tons and tons and tons of stuff going on that's in the top of my head that I want to get to, both on the basketball and the football front. So we'll have plenty of that and plenty more as we track this week. Everything going on in the transfer portal for Tennessee football and Tennessee basketball.
That is Ryan Shumpert. He is our resident Gruden grinder, if you will. You can go and follow him at rshump00. He's got football, baseball, and basketball covered on his own social media account, so it's a great follow. But also make sure just to keep in touch with what he is doing. Again, that is at rshump00, UMP. If you want to follow myself, you can do that at Rick_Butler. And of course, the third man of our trio, Jack Foster, is doing a ton of baseball coverage. So if you want to follow along with him, if you want to stay updated, see some pictures of the baseball stadium as the season goes on, check out at Jack Foster Media on Twitter. This is also Jack's jacket. I got to give it back to him. I was wearing it because the other day I was on with ABC WATE Channel 6 right here in Knoxville. We mentioned this, I think, a week or two ago on the podcast, but we're starting a new we're starting a new partnership with WATE Channel 6 right here in Knoxville. Phenomenal people and a phenomenal organization, a phenomenal company, a true leader in local sports and news right here in Knoxville. They're on your side. What more could you possibly want from your news company? And we are really excited about some of the things that we are doing. Ryan, I actually got to go do a draft show last week in the studio. I went into the big boy studio, okay? They had me up on there with the other, the Mount Rushmore of people, of local news people. They had me up there with them. That was pretty cool. I was up there with Reese, obviously Channel 6's news director, and also John Pennington. We broke down a little NFL draft coverage, which, by the way, is coming up in 2 days on Thursday. So that's been a lot of fun, but we've got a lot more to talk about with that partnership here. Maybe a little bit later on this week, maybe next week, but certainly around the corner. Rocky Top Insider and Channel 6 on your side, doing good things together. That is something that we're very, very excited about. So stay tuned for that. Otherwise, I think I've rambled a bit too much. I think we should go ahead and get out of here. That is Ryan Shumpert. I'm Rick Butler. Thank you so much for listening to the RTI Press Pass podcast. Have a good one. Have a great spring. We'll see you back for the next one.